Good morning from Vietnam. Thanks a lot for joining my Insight Sharing Show, Mark. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, we want to say thank you for being so generous to spend your time with us.
Well, you're very welcome, Ha. Very welcome.
And Mark, since you haven't been to Vietnam, please accept our invitation formally. If you travel to this part of the world, please let us know. So my wife and I, my family, will be so happy to take you and your family around town. Okay?
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And in our culture, it's very honored if we can have you to do a little introduction about who you are and the works that you do. Would you please do that for our audience, please?
Sure. It's always a big question to ask somebody that, it's like, where do I start? But in the big picture, Ha, is that I wrote a book uh, almost 12 years ago called Lead from the Heart. And the fundamental idea is that we are across the world fundamentally misleading. When I say misleading, I don't mean giving them bad information. I mean, we're not leading people in a way in our workplaces that's aligned to human nature. And we have always believed that the mind, our brain, is what drives all of our behavior. And what I put in my first book and have now completely rewritten and doubled the size of it in a second edition that just came out, and you can see it behind me in the blue, is the idea that two things. One is that we're not the rational beings that we think we are, that instead of I think, therefore I am, up to 95% of human behavior is driven by feelings and emotions. And we also know that it's not just the brain making all of our decisions, that the body, including the heart, has a huge influence on how we think and how we act. So if that's true, then what we need to be doing is to lead people in a way that aligns to supporting their well-being, to supporting their growth, to supporting their psychological and emotional safety. And the reason that, and appreciating them and developing them and coaching them and all of these kinds of things are so important is because human beings, you and me, all of your listeners, we are hardwired to thrive on the experience of positive emotions. We need positive emotions in great disproportion to negative emotions in order to thrive. So if I manage you with fear, if I manage you with intimidation, if I don't demonstrate to you that I care about you, if I demonstrate to you that I'm not trustworthy, and then I'll do whatever it takes to make my business work at your expense, all of that is negative emotions. And we think, well, I'm going to manage with fear because we know we can count on people getting their work done. But the truth is that it's short-lived because you're undermining human well-being. You're undermining human thriving. So what I'm calling for is for a new orientation in the way that we lead that says, effectively, love your people. Now, you can hold them accountable for results, and you can say, I need you to do this by such and such date, and you will still be responsible for that. So it's not like you're giving people a pass and just say do whatever and whenever. You're saying we still have goals to meet, we still have a business to run, but it's how I manage you in the most caring and supportive way while setting those goals and expectations that makes a huge difference in whether people are engaged and loyal, happy, productive, and achieving the goals that you set for them.
Wow. And then you came up with that idea 12 years ago when you first introduced the book, Leading with the Heart?
Lead from the Heart.
Lead from
Yes.
the Heart, yeah. And in this episode, we're going to examine how you lead into that book together. Is that okay?
Sure, by all means.
Alrighty. So, but let's travel time because I believe that whatever we do now always have a source of how it started. So when I was young, Mark, I always wanted to become an astronaut. All right, and jumping in different planets seems to be so cool for me. But life didn't give me any opportunity do anything near that dream that I had when I was young, right? So when you were young, what was your dream about your future, though?
That's a very interesting question because I don't know that I certainly didn't dream of being an astronaut. And I don't know how to explain this except to say that, it's one thing to have a mom and dad that would say, if you can become an astronaut, we support you. That
Uh,
would be phenomenal. And not only that, but we believe in you. So you might not have had the education opportunity or the financial support or having NASA, having rocket opportunities right where you live and so forth. But nobody said to you, that's a joke. Give up your dream. You're not smart enough to be an astronaut. You're not going to be that person. Those are better people than you. That's what I grew up with. I grew up with my mom died when I was very young, and my father abused me in the way that I just described. And so rather than having dreams of who I could be, I was sort of of the mindset that there were a lot of things that I couldn't be,
oh.
that certainly I would never have dreamt of being an astronaut because I was told repeatedly that I wasn't smart enough, good enough, capable enough to do much simpler things in life. Like my father believed that I would be a failure in anything that I set my mind to.
Hmm.
So I never really had any dreams of flying to the moon or to Mars. What I had a dream of was finding people in the world who could shine a light on me and say, you're not the person that your father is telling you. You're somebody who has value and has
Hmm.
worth and is a good person. And I did find that in my life gratefully.
Was you able to find those people?
I was.
Oh,
It's
beautiful.
interesting because there are some, I'll tell you about one. So my father remarried. My mom died when I was 9. By 10, he'd already remarried. And the woman that he married was no more loving than he was. In fact, for somebody who had just moved into the family, she was rather brutal. We'll just say that. She just very disrespectful and didn't care. Um, and so I grew up in New York, which in the winter time, this time of year, is very cold. And so I came home from school one day, and my stepmother said, I don't want you in the house. I don't want you anywhere near the house. So you come home, you change your clothes, and you stay out of the house until 7 p.m. So I got home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I wasn't allowed to be in my own home until 7. Well, you can't stay outside. It's too cold. A lot of
Mm.
days it's snow and it's freezing out, and nobody's playing outside anyway. And so I only had one place to go, and it was next door where my two best friends lived.
Oh.
And I just started going over there and then realizing that one day their mother, who had 5 children of her own, was going to say, you can't come over here every day. Like, you got to go find some other place because I got 5 kids to raise. And, it's nice having you every once in a while. So I was terrified that that's what she was going to say. And instead, a couple weeks later, she took me aside and she said, I want you to come here every day. You are part of our family. I want to welcome you here every day. So you are safe here. So she must have known what I was experiencing. I never told her, but she figured it out. And what I want you to know is she's 90. She'll be 94 years old next week. And
Oh.
we are still close, still friends. I talked to her last weekend for about an hour, and that's 50 years later.
Wow. And then what's her name?
Mrs. Whitman,
Miss
Carol
Whitman.
Whitman.
Carol
Mhm.
Whitman. Okay. So next week I will send a birthday wishes to you so you can transfer to Carol for us. Okay.
I will do that. I'll do that. That's wonderful. Her birthday is the 11th
11
of
February
February.
11, right? All right. And Mark, Look back at that. You have Carol as the one that shed lights on you, and then the journey that you are doing now shed lights to a lot of people to follow, to look up, to find motivation and inspirations, and that is the purpose for my for the Inside Sharing show that we do. We use stories of amazing people, who overcome challenges and do amazing things in the world, so that they can, become a life for that people to follow. So from that 9 years old growing up, and please tell us how the journey took place for you after that.
So I'm not really sure why he did this, but so when my mom died, my father remarried. I was 10, and when I had just graduated from high school, my father said, "It's time for you to live on your own."
Mm.
And so he kicked me out of the house with no money, no support, no invitation to come home on holidays or birthdays or come home for a Sunday dinner. He literally asked me to leave with giving me nothing.
Mm.
And you can imagine somebody who's not expecting to be kicked out of the house when they have no income and no money to go find a place to live and then also try to go to college. So what I had done, and I hope I can explain this properly, but because my father had told me that I was never going to be anyone, amount to anyone, I believed that if I didn't graduate from college, that he would have been right. He would have proved me right. So I made the decision that I was going to graduate from college no matter what. But you can imagine when you're trying to live and just find a place to sleep and eat and how you're going to pay for it, that the first couple of years was really painful, very, very painful. And so what ended up happening for me was I did figure it out. I got a job, and I started to kind of figure out a way of managing my life where you wake up and you go to school, and then you go to work, and then you go back to the library, you stay there till midnight, and then you go home, you go to bed, and just keep repeating this. Ultimately, you're going to get through. And I did. So by the time I was done, I graduated from a great university in America, and I did very well. But I was massively deficient in a lot of things. And deficient in the sense that I wasn't dreaming of being an astronaut. I was thanking the gods that I managed to get a degree and like believing like that's the best it's going to be. Like I somehow pulled this off, but I don't have any dreams of going to law school or graduate school or anything like that because I'm not that person. So my father's voice is still very deep inside of me, even though I've just graduated from a great college and I've done well and I'm going off to start my career. And I just realized that the confidence level of people that were my age coming out with the same education were just in a different place psychologically and emotionally. They believed in themselves, and they didn't just have dreams. They were like, I'm going to fulfill those dreams. And I was like, phew, like I can't believe I survived this. But what I did was I started thinking about like, what's the difference between me and them? Like, why do they feel so confident that they can apply to a college? I'm believing if I apply to a graduate school, they're going to laugh. That's what I was thinking when I was graduating. And I realized that what I didn't get growing up was somebody who cared about me, somebody who thoughtfully directed me to help me pick the right classes, somebody who encouraged me. Hey, I hear you got a good grade on your paper. Congratulations. Would you like to talk about the book that you just read? Because I can help you. I've already been through all of this. I didn't have safety on any level. I always was terrified about money. If I didn't have enough money, then I wasn't going to be able to go to school. So there was massive instability. I didn't have love, is really what it came down to. So, and I can't explain this. I can't, even to this day. I believe, and I'll say this parenthetically, that what I'm going to tell you is an explanation that I was put here on this planet to do this work. I was put here to have the horrible upbringing and getting kicked out of the house and having this massive struggle and having my whole first 18, 22 years of my life just being a massive struggle for a reason. Because when I started managing people, I unconsciously gave them all the things that I always wanted and never got. So I made them feel safe. I taught them, like, if I read a book over the weekend, I would type up the notes and give them to everyone. I coached them and said, hey, it took me many years to learn this, but I want to teach you so you don't have to go through what I did. So what happened is that I just thought everybody managed this way, but they didn't. And when I was in my early 40s, somebody who had worked for me for 20 years said, you manage people very, very differently. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, look around you. Everybody else is managing with fear and, raising their voice if they're not achieving their goals and making people feel threatened. And you're doing it with a totally different approach. And I said, well, what do you mean? And so she started to give me examples of what I was doing. And I was, I think, 42 years old when I realized that the way that I had been managing people was a direct response to how I was raised, my whole upbringing. Beautiful. And when I realized that, and I had done it all unconsciously, I was never thinking I was going to be doing podcasts with someone in Vietnam. I'm thinking I'm going to continue to be a better leader by understanding this because what I'm doing is working. So I started refining it, and experimenting with it, and doing more of it. And every team I ever managed just was unbelievably successful. So I just kept getting promoted. So fast forward, I ended up leaving my career in a very, very senior level position in banking, financial services. And a friend of mine, so I started to write the book, and a friend of mine said, you're going to have to explain why your practices work. Otherwise, his words, he said, people would think you need to have a shitty childhood in order to lead this way. And it amused me, but also I realized in the moment that I hadn't done that work. Like I hadn't figured out, why did people respond to this? Like, what was the effect on people? Why did they scale mountains for me? I just took it on faith that if I said, I had great success with this, if you do this, you'll have great success. And he was like, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. So I spent 18 more months looking for research to validate my thesis and the core piece of it. I found an unbelievable amount, which became the whole first half of the book, and it's the first half of the new book. But what I want you to know is that I reached out to a world-class cardio surgeon, heart surgeon, and I said, I have this belief that what I was doing for people in the way that I led them was affecting them so deeply, like in their heart. That's what I believe. Like and so I wrote her and I said, you're this world-class heart surgeon. Is it possible that I could have been affecting the hearts of people? Like that's what triggered their behavior, that their feeling inside their hearts could motivate this? And she said, no one has ever asked that question before. Ever. But you're right. She says, we're finding this out, that we always believed the heart was just a pump that circulated our blood. And now we're knowing that the heart and the mind are connected and that the heart sends more signals to the brain than the other way around. And so when you say lead from the heart, she goes, you're affecting people and literally, not metaphorically. And that is what gave me the courage to call the book Lead from the Heart, because the science that's emerging shows we have more than one form of intelligence, more than just this, that our whole bodies are filled with neural cells, and that our hearts are very much involved in influencing human choices and behavior.
Beautiful, beautiful. Mark, I want to bring you back onto the journey that in the leadership journey that you've been in, right? And your life, you came from the background of lacking of love, lacking of care and encouragement. And in that environment, a lot of people get out of that environment being lack of certain things in their life also. So then when and at work, the world is not gonna be in full circle. but you've been able to not to transform from there and show the people you lead with care, with love, with whatever that you've been lacked before. What message did you talk to you back then every day though?
What was the last part of the question? Because you're summarizing it beautifully. I just want to understand your question.
Yeah, the question was, what message did you talk to you? Did you remind yourself every day back then for you to keep doing that amazing work that you lack of from the environment you
I,
had before? Yeah.
I don't think I. So let's start with the premise that I was not aware.
Mm,
So I'm managing people for the very first time,
mm,
and on some level, I decided I'm going to care about these people.
mm,
I'm going to make them feel safe. I'm going to make them feel supported. I'm going to be their advocate. I want them to trust me. And if they don't think I'm doing a good job, they can come and tell me that, and it's
mm,
not going to get them into trouble. I'm going to appreciate them. I'm going to make sure they don't go home on a Friday night wondering whether or not their boss is happy with them. If I'm happy with them, I'm going to tell them, you're doing a fantastic job. I'm so grateful I hired you. Go home and have a wonderful weekend.
mm,
And so what happened was, from a very early age, I'm managing people and getting great success out of people. And I just thought, this is how people manage. This is what everybody does.
ah,
I didn't realize that I was playing off of how I was raised. It went from my own instincts.
mm,
And because I got such great results and just kept getting promoted and promoted and promoted, I didn't question it.
mm,
I didn't go, why is this working? I just was like, just keep doing what you're doing. It's working. So the thing is that it was instinctual.
ah,
Like I did this because of who I am. That's what
ah,
I came to realize, right? And who I am was, of course, very much shaped by how I was raised.
mm,
And so I think that I was beginning to see it myself, but when this person, her name was Cecilia, when she had been working for me off and on for 20 years. So she'd seen me over and over and over and seen the different teams that I'd managed and how I got them to be so high performing. And when she said it to me, I think I had come to the same conclusion at the same time. Like, I am a great leader because of that upbringing
mm,
and because I just wanted to give people what I didn't get and see how it worked. And the other thing, is that it was hugely healing for me to see other people do so well,
beautiful.
knowing that I had a role in it. Be
Wow.
like me coaching you and you becoming an astronaut.
Ah,
Like, wow, I helped him. That's healing. That
ah,
helped me. So when I was successful and I could see people, I could see the joy that people had and the desire to work for me and the desire to work hard for me, I knew that was a result of my leadership, and that made me feel really good, and that helped me build confidence and overturn the feedback that I'd gotten from my father and kind of heal that process over a period of years.
so Cecilia was the one that came to you and told you that you are good leaders who lead really differently from other leaders, right?
Correct.
Wow, beautiful. How nice of her to come and give that message to you. So it brought you into a new directions in your life also, because I know that I noticed that you've been running your own company for over 13 years by now, right? All right. So was
Correct.
that a part of from Cecilia's talk that transformed you to decided to take in a new directions in your career?
No, not exactly.
Ah, okay.
So what happened was when she said that to me, I thought so now I'm putting the pieces together. I'm like,
Ah,
oh my goodness, my childhood upbringing and all my mom dying, dad's abuse, stepmother's abuse, getting kicked out of the house, all that struggle. It rewired me. It changed me. So when Cecilia said that to me, I was like, I want to I don't think I anticipated that I'd ever write a book or do this work. I really just thought I'm doing well in my career and I want to refine my understanding. Now that I understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, let's do more of it and see what happens. So got I became sort of like an expert at my own practices, if you will, because I really figured out, okay, this is how it works. And I knew now what I was doing. So what ended up happening was almost, I don't know, 7 years later, the bank that I was working for was acquired by another organization. And the way they treated their people was so bad and so disrespectful that after 9 months, I decided I don't want to work for these people at this level. I don't want to be a representative of their standard of leadership, which was abusive of people and exploitive of people. So I decided to leave. And when I decided to leave, I had this inkling that maybe I'm going to write a book. But the idea was to say, do these practices, do these things that I learned to do, and you will get great results from people. But then, when my friend told me that I was going to have to explain why it worked, and I found the research that just completely confirmed that everything we're doing is wrong and everything that I'm recommending is right, I realized, wait a minute, like, this is coming full circle. Like, this isn't just for me to write a book and then go back to work and forget about it. This is like, I'm the Pied Piper for this idea. Like, this is who I'm meant to be. You're not going back to work. You're going to be an advocate for this message, for this idea.
Beautiful.
So that's what brought the company about, and that's what has led me here.
And Mark, in our culture, in the Eastern culture, we believe in something called destiny also. So somebody was born with that calling, and then so your life was a prime example of living, experimenting, and respond to the callings, to have people to change the practices of leading, and so the whole notion of leading from the heart basically is now proof worldwide that is an effective leadership model.
Yeah, but I want you to know it's been a real struggle. It's not like I wrote the book and people woke up and said, "Oh, we should start leading this way." It was like, no, we don't need to do this, and we don't need to care about people and pay people their paycheck, and they have a job. They should feel lucky. Like, I don't need to be coaching them. I don't need to appreciate them. I don't need to care for them. So it's been a real uphill battle. And there have been many, many days where I have thought, this is too painful for me to continue, because people just dismissed it. They heard the idea of leading from the heart and they thought, oh, he must be a religious nut or a spiritualist or someone who doesn't get business. And it was the latter that most people landed on. It was like, you don't bring heart into leadership. Everybody knows that. So whoever wrote this book is stupid, is a fool. And so, when you start with a conversation and they go, that sounds really stupid, it's hard to persuade somebody to open their mind to fully understand that I'm not talking about this heart, the romantic Valentine heart. I'm talking about this biological, anatomical heart that we're discovering does a lot more than just pump our blood. So if you can get your head around that, you can throw away all the other stuff, because we're really talking about science. But it was right until, honestly, in the business world, it was very recently where business is becoming to realize that everything that I've said for the last 12, 13 years is true.
And then, Mark, that leading to a very curious question from my end. All right, we are creator of feelings, of habits, right? And we know that in our life there's a lot of things that happen to us, and then and then leading by the feelings. So we remember how good feelings leading to how how we gonna remember that, how we're gonna be productive and efficient in what we do through the good feelings, right? Good motivations. And leaders are amazing people. Leaders are not stupid, right? They've been leading the team to success, but why did they fail? Recognizing the importance of leading by the heart for that many years.
A couple of reasons I think is one is that um, we they, we haven't managed this way ever in history. So if you go back, you think about like in the ancient history, in the Middle Ages, the serfs, were abused by the landowners, and in the Industrial Revolution, people were told that I'm going to pay you to do your job, and I'll give you a little bit more if you produce more than my expectations. But if you don't do a good job, I have somebody waiting to take your job. So I'm going to let you go and find someone new. Well, that's traditional leadership theory, which says pay people as little as possible, squeeze as much out of them as possible. So, and then you have another spin, which is that many companies, the largest employers in our world, are corporations, and they are owned by shareholders. And so if you go to a shareholder and you say, hey, we're going to send Ha to training because we think that investing in Ha is going to be a good long-term benefit for the company, you will have some shareholders say, let Ha go get his own training. I don't want you spending that money on him because that means you're taking it away from me. And so this is what you're seeing in technology right now. Business is slowing. And so rather than saying to people, hey, let's figure out some ways of saving money, let's, maybe everybody take a month off unpaid, but nobody loses their job, right? So that would be a sacrifice. But if I said to you, if you took a month off and everybody else took a month off, but you get to come back to your job, wouldn't that be better than saying, you don't work here again, ever again? I mean, that's a better deal. But nobody's doing this. Nobody's thinking this way because the shareholders are saying, you need to cut your costs by millions and millions of dollars. And so the fastest way to do it is just to fire people. Well, that destroys trust. It destroys, any proposition that people matter here, you're valued. Like if you get in trouble and the first thing you think to do is to fire me, well, then I don't matter. Yeah. And you may let me go, but everybody else that's staying now knows that if things get worse, they're going to be next. So you've polluted the waters of trust. You've destroyed people's sense that this is the place that cares about me, and you'll never recover it. So if you went out and you said, hey, we need to save $100 million, and I'm putting a team of people together to come up with ideas. Now, you still may end up having to let some people go. Maybe there's some businesses that are slowing down where you just don't need that talent, right? But it doesn't need to be, tens of thousands of people. So if you can demonstrate to employees that we did everything we could to prevent this layoff, people would understand it. People would say, hey, you did your best. We understand. But when you make no effort, then people just look at you and they just think, well, why should I be loyal to you? Yeah. And if they're not loyal, well, then they're not going to put in discretionary effort. They're not going to work on weekends. They're not going to do any of the things that you would love for them to do, or stay late, put their heart into their work, my language, universal language. So we do a lot of harm by thinking that the way we've traditionally managed people, which is you're lucky to have a job, I'm going to find somebody else if you don't do a good job, and I'm going to let you go if things get into trouble. None of that works in this world any longer.
Beautiful. And then because of the people like you who leading that change 12 years ago, and eventually, the world started to follow that, because that is fundamentally is supposed to be the way leaders leading, right? I want to ask again, and because it's repeatedly happening in your life, because you you always went through challenges and go against it, right? From the word of lacking of love, lacking of support, you went against it and experimenting pains, and but to get the college degree and get into to the corporate world and working. And when you had the idea of a new kind of leadership, and through your prime example of how you successfully leading teams, right, and are leading from the heart, you went out and advocate that for other people, and you got a lot of pains also because of rejections, because of people don't believe in that what you believe. So during that time, again, what did you talk to yourself to make sure that you can go through such pains and continue doing that works?
It's a very good question because there have been days where I haven't been that strong, to be honest with you.
Mm.
Um, but I think that, so for one, it's interesting because education embraced this almost immediately. So the book, while business still kind of, we're not so sure, 10 universities in America have used my book and taught it in their classes. And so that was one form of encouragement that kept me going. Another is that I started writing articles for Fast Company magazine, and I started to realize that people were reading them. Like they might think that my idea is crazy, but when they read the article, they're like, "Huh, like he's making sense. Like I actually agree with that." So I was having influence, and then I started my own podcast, and it's has an audience in 163 countries now. It's in the top 1.5% of all podcasts in the world. And I realize people want to lead this way. That's why they're listening. They want permission. They want guidance. And then the final piece is that my wife and family have been hugely, like they believe this is what I'm here for. And so on the days when I say, I can't take this because this is just like when you know something is true and you have resistance from people based on nothing, just on their own instincts and their own, right? Like their own immaturity, their own lack of consciousness, whatever, to just dismiss it without understanding it. It gets painful after a while. And so I've had family and friends that kind of, dust you off, pick you back up, and say get back in there. And that's been really helpful. Had I not had that, I wouldn't have kept going.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, Mark, now go to the book. All right. So, leading from the heart. Now we know the fundament, the overall of that. So, tell us about the book. What is that? Like structures and for our audience.
So the beginning is the very beginning of the book is the preface, and the preface tells the story of my upbringing in greater detail than what I've shared here. But it came to the conclusion that I hope your audience has already, which is that it influenced me, my upbringing influenced me to see the world, approach the world very, very differently. And had I not had that upbringing, I never would have been the person I am. I never would have been talking to you. I never would have written the book, and I never would have had the idea of we need to change fundamentally how we lead and align it to something that's more humane. Never would have had any of that, right? So that's the preface of it, so that people can understand, like, why is he talking like this? Why does he see the world this way? And I think when people read my story and they see the pain that I went through, I think a lot of them realize I went through that. Not my exact experience, but I talk to people, and most people will start to tell me, my daddy was hard on me, or my mom was difficult, or, I lost both of my parents in a car accident, or
my dad was an alcoholic, or what. You start to hear these stories and the pain that people went through, and I think it starts to give people hope that like you can still have a good life if you have those kinds of problems, and a lot of people do.
Yep.
So from there, the first half of the book is all of the research, which shows that people around the world are actually suffering. It's no longer that they're not happy in their jobs. Mental illness, mental health, burnout, depression, anxiety, stress are at all-time highs. Like we've never seen them this high. And so if we're managing our workplaces, where do you spend most of your time? You spend most of your life at work. So if we have all of those problems, it's clearly a report card that something's not right about the way we manage. It's something in our spirit, I believe. Like we're managing people in a way that's harming people and their core, their deepest level. And there's so much evidence, it's unbelievable, whether it's Gallup's data on, and I was first to report this, on engagement, on all the things we just talked about. Then there's evidence of companies that have already adopted this on their own. So without any influence from me, they figured this out. They started experimenting and started doing it and started to see the same outcomes that I did. And so for anybody to go, well, that'll never work in business, here are some companies that have not only done it, but have done it for a very long time and did it in a way that made them successful and made people thrive. And then there are four practices of leading from the heart. So the second half of the book is dedicated to those practices, which have to do with a new mindset around hiring, a new mindset around the relationships that you need to build with people and to get to know their story so that you can support people individually. That it's not just I'm managing everybody the same way. You need to manage people on a very personal level, and you need to know their story in order to get that. Another is to actively develop. We know that growth, the sense that I am growing, is one of the single greatest drivers of engagement. So I talk all about different ways for managers, workplace managers, and leaders to develop people, even if they don't have resources to send them to expensive training. There's all kinds of things that you can do to make people feel legitimately that they're growing. Promoting them from within is one, by the way. Giving them the sense that if you work hard and you take the coaching and development to heart that I'm giving you, that you could be doing something more down the road. More senior, more challenge, depending upon whether you want that. And then the final has to do with recognition and appreciation and how fundamentally important that is, but also how there's just very little evidence that most managers do a very good job of it. And then people, they say, oh yeah, my people know how much I appreciate them. And then you go to their people and they go, he never tells us. We never hear it. I don't know. I work really hard and my manager never says anything. So there's that. And then there's an addendum, sort of in addition to a lot of the new information in the book. There's more data on emotions and confirming. So very recent research from state-of-the-art people, major academics, that have landed on, wait a minute, feelings and emotions are driving our behavior. It's not our rational being, up to 95% of our behavior. And so what I end the book with is this confirmation that it's irrefutable. Like there's nothing you can say that, oh, this is too soft or this is too weak or you don't bring heart. It's like there's so much data here and so much compelling research from so many different impressive people. And then finally, I speak, interestingly, people ask me two questions almost every time I speak. The first one is, whatever happened to Mrs. Whitman? We talked about her. So I tell them that I went back to New York for her 90th birthday. They have 5 children. They're all still alive. I was the only one that she wanted there that wasn't one of her own children. And so she's still very close. And then the last piece was, did you ever reconcile with your father? And I won't tell you the answer. I'll leave it to your readers, to your audience to read it. But it's a question that people ask me over and over, and it has a pretty interesting outcome.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I hope one day that you will give that answers to your audience also, the second questions, but it's up to you, right? So to give that answer. So, Mark, go to the book. If you pick one chapter that you really, really like most from the book, what would that chapter be and why?
It's interesting because I failed to mention it. I absolutely failed to mention it directly. But it's the very first chapter that I wrote of the book. And it's all about the science of the heart and how we have, for hundreds of years, believed that the brain is where all of our cognitive activity is, and that the heart was just a pump. And now we're learning not just that the heart is intelligence, but that our entire body there's something called interoception, which, by the way, I did not write about, but it's emerging now. So since my book came out just a few months ago, there's 2 authors that are writing about this. And it's feelings and intelligence that's happening in our bodies, and that our bodies are sensing information. They're sensing things that are going to happen without them happening yet. We have this. It's like a 8th sense, if you will. It's like even deeper than an intuition. It's informed, and it's coming from our body. And I believe that the heart is part of this, very much so. And so, where does that come from? What is that intelligence? Is that spiritual intelligence? I don't know. But what we know is that it exists, and we know that if you tap into it, and we, by the way, know that Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs and the founder of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, that they repeatedly say that they will be presented with data, but then make decisions based on a feeling. Well, what's that? Right? So it's the chapter that I'm proudest of, besides the preface, simply because no one's ever put these pieces together. I went outside of leadership, traditional leadership books, and went to cardiosurgery and heart science and put these pieces together. Beautiful. And I'm proud of it because everybody continues to talk about, now we're talking about heart-led leadership, and they're just talking about it metaphorically. And I'm saying, no, it's not a metaphor. It's real, it's science. And if you understand that, it becomes easier to embrace than just a metaphor.
Wow. And Mark, a lot of leaders are now still practicing the old traditional leadership practices, right? So if they want to transform onto a heart, like a leading by from their hearts, what do they need to prepare now for that new journey and become a more transformative leaders?
I think that that my greatest influence might just be, particularly with men, but not necessarily, that I'm actually giving people permission to lead in a way that not only feels more natural, more satisfying and rewarding, but something that they've been thinking they should have been doing for a long time, but were told not to. And so if you've ever had the idea that being an ally, and I don't mean a best friend, I don't mean have them over for Sunday dinner or go out and drink beers with them or tea or coffee or whatever. I'm talking about building a trusting relationship with the people that work for you and advocate for them. If you've ever had an inclination to do that, I'm saying do it. I'm saying there's no downside to starting now. You don't have to wait for your company to do this. You don't have to wait for your manager to tell you to do this. Just do it. Because, for my whole life, I proved it. And for the last 13 years, I've proved it scientifically. Right? So, and by the way, the only reason I did that was because my friend alerted me to the fact that people need proof before they're going to believe anything.
Yeah.
That we should, if I say to you that, think about it this way. Think about you personally being my employee. And if I say to you, you have two choices, on the way that I'll manage you. I can manage you with fear. If you don't do a good job, I'm going to yell at you, and so understand that. And if you really don't do a good job, well, I'm going to have to let you go. And I'm probably not going to do much for you. I mean, there's a job. You figure it out. Do your best work. And like I said, if you don't rise to the occasion, then I may have to find somebody else for you. So that's option A. But I'm going to pay you. You have a job. You're working for me. Okay. So, and option B is, if you work for me, I'm going to care about you. Just because you work. I'm going to invest in time with you. I'm going to figure out what you do best and help maximize that talent. I'm going to check in with you regularly and see how things are going so that we both feel good about the relationship and so that we can fix it if it's broken ever at any point. And I'm also going to make sure that you know where you stand so that you never have to worry, is my boss happy with what I'm doing? And I'm going to appreciate you openly. I'm going to tell everybody, just did really great work, and I want everybody to know it. Which boss do you want to work for? The first one or the second one?
Of course, the second one.
How many people listening to you think would want the first one?
I don't think any.
So why are we managing people that way then?
Because we didn't know.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Yeah, that's very insightful. And somebody just pointed this out to me, that people want to, they just don't know how. And that's a big leap from where we've been. Up until now, it's been, I don't want it because I don't think it sounds right. Sounds stupid or misinformed, or that'll backfire and I'll get fired, or I'm not going to meet my goals. And now people are warming up to it. But I think you're right. I think it's because we've never told them that this is how to lead. We've just left it up to their innate. So we manage people the same way we were managed, and we were managed in the fear and intimidation way. So we just keep passing it on. So we need to stop and start teaching this way, so that when people become, your age and my age, that they're capable of going in there and loving their people.
Beautiful. And Mark, for a very long time, we heard a lot of talk about, like leading with, and, love what you do and do what you love, right? But so the work is a very important part of life. And if our leaders can ignite, can change and transform the way that they lead to have the people find love in their works, that will make the work becoming so meaningful for their employees. And thanks for leading that. I have two last questions for this conversation. Is that okay for you to spare additional few more minutes with me?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I love to know about thinking, all right, because my wife and I, we've been talking to over 500 experts, including, a lot of, well thought leaders around the world on how they think, because we believe that the thinking is the first part of the transformation. If we think well, we think right, then we will, have the positive change. So over the years, what was your secret that helped you to expand your ability to think, Mark?
I read at least a book a week and have for probably the last 30 years.
Okay.
And so curiosity is the answer.
Curiosity.
What don't I know? what can I learn that will make me more effective? And you start to realize that, after you've read a lot of books, and the placeholder behind you, interestingly, is a whole bunch of books, and you start to pick up themes and ideas that are consistent, and they change you. And one of the things that I've done for the last 30 years is whenever I read a book that's nonfiction. So first of all, I read mostly. I don't really make time to read fiction, although there's nothing wrong with fiction. I just tend to lean into nonfiction. I will write all over my book, and then I will type up notes that I can read later. And so I'll just show you. This is just a small sample of book summaries that I have for every book that I've read over the last 25, 30 years. So what happens is when I go on an airplane and I'm traveling, I'll take 10 of those with me and just go through them. And it reinforces, you don't remember everything that you read in a book, but I have the notes of what I thought was most important, and it's changed me, And by the way, I take those and I give them to people so that it's not just, because it's a time-intensive thing.
Yeah.
But when I give them to other people, particularly people who work for me, I'm influencing them. So it's a benefit for me to say, hey, I read the book, I typed up the notes, would you like them? And people are like, yeah, I don't have to spend all those hours that you did, sure, But now I'm sharing information, and now I'm having a conversation with someone about something that I read. So we're reinforcing it, and they're going, well, what about this? And so curiosity is the answer.
Beautiful, beautiful. The last question is about the future. So we've been examining your past and the present already. Let's examine the future a little bit. Is there anything that exciting you are working on and you want to share with us so that we can celebrate with you in advance, Mark?
Well, one thing that we're working on right now is online training. That it's going to be a Lead from the Heart course that will teach managers. So if you hear me speak or you read my book, then you'll get the reinforcement of real life examples. You have this situation with this employee. How would you use the Lead from the Heart principles? So I'm working on that. And I won't say where, but a company, I'll just say in Europe, in a major city in Europe, has decided that they want to take this entire philosophy and change their entire culture. Oh. And so I'm going to help them to do that. And so why that's so exciting is because it's a reminder that what I'm talking about is universal. Yeah. It's not America or Great Britain or an English-speaking country. This is what we're talking about here, and have talked for this last hour, is human. Yeah. It's every job. So people will go, oh, well, I work in manufacturing. That sounds like a great idea, Lead from the Heart, but that won't work in manufacturing. And then you talk to somebody in, hardware, and you go, you run a bunch of hardware stores. Could you manage like this? Oh, well, no, that won't work for us. That's something that will work for other people. No, I'm here to tell you, you're wrong. You're wrong. It doesn't matter what job people do. It doesn't matter their age. It doesn't matter man or woman, college educated, no college, whatever. Everybody responds to this because they're humans. This is what people need in order to optimally perform. And you can continue to manage them with fear and make yourself feel like you're doing a good job and letting people feel hard to go home and drink too much and have arguments with their spouses because they're under so much stress. Or you can support people in a way where they look forward to going to work and doing great work and having great work. It's universal. It works everywhere. That's kind of
exciting, and I congratulate you in advance for that. And all the work start to get paid off. And Mark, it's so honored for me to having you on our show, and so thankful for you sharing your journey, your stories, and a lot of advices for us to change our way of thinking about leadership and moving toward into the transformative leadership in leading from the heart. And I wish you well. I wish you all the best. I wish you all the love and the support that you will have for, so that you will continue spread the new way for people to leading, so that they can bring positive change into the world of works. That's very important, and I hope to see you in person one day.
Thank you for being so persistent and for making this happen. And it's been a delight to meet you. So thank you very much.
Thank
I
you
really
very much.
very much enjoyed it.
Say hello to your family for us, please. All right.
I will indeed. Thank you, and to yours. Thank you. Best of success with your program.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Hub.
Bye bye.